There are several reactors to be built with Westinghouse technology, mainly in Poland. Now there is a project in Bulgaria. There are several reactors promised to the Ukraine. Although now the industry claims that this is a unique chance for reactors and that they are very efficient and reliable, we see that the classic problems of nuclear power didn't change. There is still the same cost overruns due to enormous construction time delays and design problems. And this is also valid for Westinghouse. On top of those project problems, Westinghouse has also specific circumstances which we looked into.
So my job is a political job, and this is how I found myself connected to nuclear energy, because in a couple of months we are expecting a referendum in Slovenia with the question whether we should continue with investing in nuclear energy. We do not know because nobody knows yet. So the investor project has to be developed by the company that owns current nuclear power plant. And they plan to develop the project till the year 2027 or 28. They are not capable of explaining exactly, but in the 27 or 28, they promise to show the project. Now, before they really start to develop the project, the government decided to ask people if that is worthwhile, and therefore we will have this referendum. They seem prepared, but it is mostly PR. So what they are persuading people is that we cannot do we cannot do the green transition without nuclear energy. And this is the only thing we actually know. We don't know who will finance the project, where the power plant will be, when it will be finished, how long, how much it will cost, who will build it, and so on. So these questions, real questions, we have no answers. It is quite clear that the company Gain Energia, they are called, they know that they will not be able to finance the project themselves. Also, let's say, the Republic of Slovenia will be unable to finance even one reactor. So they have to find co-investors. And the co-investor will have a word. And of course, they will gain a lot of electricity. But the problems will stay in Slovenia. It puts us as a state in a very interesting position, because it is like we would like somebody to somehow semi-colonize us with another nuclear power plant. And if we invest in nuclear power plant, we will not have the funds to invest in new technologies. So this is why, for me, it's a poor decision.
There were two AP1000 projects, and I'll show you where in just a minute. The first one was a total failure. It was terminated after about $9 billion was spent on construction and probably about $2 billion on interest. And that is growing. It's growing every month, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And you can see the sentence there. There is a cover-up. It appears to me that what's going on here is it's been covered up. They're trying to erase the history of what happened with it's called VC Summer. So there's one reactor right there. There's reactor number 2, and reactor number 3, the cooling towers. So this is what the site looks like now. Right there, steam generators on the ground. They walked away from the project after it failed in 2017. So this whole thing is still there. The reactor itself is open to the air. The turbine buildings open to the air, just sitting there. All these buildings here were full of equipment, and that potentially could go to Ukraine. So this is the Vogel project, units 3 and 4, started in 2009. The first reactor did start operation in 2023. The second one just about a month ago. And the cost estimate, well, I have $14.5 billion. It ended up right now about $36 billion or more. And the rates for the people in Georgia, electricity rates, have gone up 24%. For VC Summer and the company South Carolina Electric and Gas, we don't know how much we paid for this. Construction was $9 billion, and there's some other companies involved. And I don't know if you know the expression construction work in progress, QUIP. We paid in advance. So from 2009 to 2016, we had 9 rate increases. This is simply for interest rates. The project stopped here. This was planned. This did not happen. And this is only for interest. If they had started operation, the construction cost would be like this. We would be paying half the electricity bill for this project if it had continued. And they lied about this the whole way. So right now we're paying 5.6% of our monthly electric bill for absolutely nothing. So they're making money off that because they make profit off how much they spent or wasted. And we're going to have to pay this for another 15 years, and we get absolutely nothing. South Carolina Electric and Gas, 2 officials. The federal attorneys determined this was a criminal conspiracy because they lied to the regulators. They lied about the schedule, they lied about the cost, they lied about management problems and the technical difficulties. And this guy with the company went to prison for 2 years already. He's Westinghouse, guilty of criminal conspiracy, felony fraud. He's not gotten his sentence yet. He could go to prison. But it was only 4 people who got charged by the federal government. And there have been no criminal charges in Vogel because the project continued. South Carolina Electric and Gas went bankrupt, and another company took them over. And they were too small to sustain the project. And that's, if you only have 1.5 million people in Slovenia, there's not enough people to support this.
One of the things to really understand is that the U.S. government has decided that it wants to become the global leader in nuclear energy once again. And it sees itself directly, it frames this very much in the context of competition with Russia and China. And so in fact today they're going to be voting to pass a very large pro-nuclear bill called the ADVANCE Act. Includes a lot of benefits for the nuclear industry, but one of those is going to be a lot of support for exporting U.S. nuclear reactors around the world. And setting up the U.S., as essentially the country that will help you set up your new nuclear reactor program in your country. There's not a lot of money for exporting nuclear reactors in the bill, and there's still a lot of obstacles to the U.S. providing that kind of financing. So I'll talk about that more in a little bit, but what they really want, and this has become very explicit in the political discussions in Washington, is they want to establish durable alliances through relationships of dependency that nuclear energy projects create. And so this has been stated very clearly in a statement that influential policy people sent to Congress a few years ago. It's now being quoted in the legislation in Congress. It's being quoted in the memorandums that the legislators are circulating among themselves and in the hearings themselves. So this is the U.S. trying to put other countries in a position of dependency to be able to, you know, these are not equal relationships. These are relations of dependency that the U.S. is trying to build by exporting nuclear reactors. The nuclear firms themselves, they lack capitalization and cash flow. These are not, you know, Westinghouse is not, does not have enough of its own money to take this risk. So the U.S. projects depend on subsidies and buyer self-finance. So the U.S. government is not going to cover the cost overruns. They're not going to accept any liability for the delays, and neither is Westinghouse. The federal government provides loan guarantees to basically make the banks more comfortable. They have now direct subsidies and cost-sharing grants to build reactors in the U.S. The federal government in 2021 and 2022 passed two pieces of legislation that provide up to $140 billion in subsidies and financing for nuclear power projects and existing reactors and new reactors. So there's a massive amount of government money going to back up the whole nuclear industry in the U.S. now. So there are some obstacles. The U.S. doesn't have much to sell in terms of nuclear power. There's a shortage of commercially available reactor designs the U.S. could actually supply to other countries. The AP1000 is the only U.S. reactor that has been built in almost 20 years. The trouble is that there's insufficient manufacturing and supply chains for building these reactors. None of the companies actually has the industrial capacity for making the components to be able to provide some level of cost surety and efficiency to the projects they're going to export. And the firms themselves, this is Westinghouse, General Electric, they are focused on providing fuel and services for existing reactors. And so from Westinghouse's standpoint, if none of these AP1000s get built, they have already cornered the market share for fueling Russian-designed reactors in Europe because of the war in Ukraine. And so they're already looking at an increase in their business from selling fuel to reactors in Eastern Europe. Westinghouse was always focused on selling reactors, not building them. And so Westinghouse would sell you your reactor design. They would sell you the turbine. They would sell you a lot of the infrastructure that goes into building a nuclear power plant. But they were never responsible for building them themselves, except for the first few. They sold 5 reactors in the late 50s and early 60s as turnkey projects. What that meant was that Westinghouse would sell one of these early reactors to a utility company at a fixed cost, and no one ever knew what the final cost was. Westinghouse took losses on those in order to get other utility companies interested. And so then after that, they sold dozens of reactors to other utility companies, but that's when the costs started to go up. The delays happened, the costs went up. They nearly bankrupted several utility companies in the US with the cost of building these projects. Westinghouse, as I've been saying, sort of leaves a trail of destruction in its wake. Post-bankruptcy, Westinghouse ended nuclear construction management. It has been very clear that it is not going to be involved in the actual construction of reactors in other countries or in the US or anywhere. They simply cannot take on that financial risk, or else they'll go into bankruptcy again. So they're reverting to the original role they played in the 1960s and 70s. They'll market the reactor designs for sale. They will provide engineering and support for getting projects approved and underway, but they're not going to be the one physically doing the construction work. So today, Westinghouse is basically organized in this way where they do fuel production, they provide services and parts for operating reactors, they provide some services for managing spent fuel and decommissioning. It's not really clear what that means for them. They're not actually the contractor in any decommissioning projects in the U.S. And then they have their R&D division, which is the one that's developing they're selling the AP1000 and these small modular microreactor designs are working on. Westinghouse's role is to provide the design, and they've been assembling teams of contractors in some of the countries, notably Poland and Bulgaria, where they're involving local manufacturers and other contractors in putting together a team to build AP1000s. But Westinghouse is not going to be involved in construction. And so what they're doing is setting up the same experience again that happened in the US, with manufacturers who didn't have any experience building nuclear reactors or the AP1000, and then got them into trouble because they had losses on the cost of doing these things because the cost kept on going up. So one of the things that I think is really significant is that if smaller countries, manufacturers are going to take on the risk of building these AP1000s, then they're putting the industrial infrastructure of smaller countries at risk.
I think that this is not realistic and no future for this project, because from the beginning projects start with illegal measure from Bulgarian government and parliament, without public discussion, without real tender, and this is an illegal decision, political decision about only one type of reactor for Westinghouse, AP1000. Everything is like history of Belenet, this catastrophe Belenet, like Belenet 2, only political declaration, but no real situation with to make this project and to understand that Bulgaria needs new nuclear power plant. This is not economical reason to make new nuclear power plant.
As of now, it's taken about 15 years with the preparations. One of the most year was 2015, when the government, which overtook from the previous government of Tusk, changed the procedures and gave up announcing of the competitive tender. Since that year, further delays occurred, and even for the past, for the ensuing 5 years, basically nothing happened as regards the completing of the milestones, crucial tasks, except for the environmental surveys, which were completed in 2023. In certain documents, official and governmental communication, Westinghouse became more and more visible. It was named and described in various reports more often than other applicants. In 2020, an intergovernmental agreement was concluded with the US government to promote the US reactor technology, and certain technical reports were promised to be carried out. It took almost 2 years to complete them, and in November 2022, the government, through a decree, decided that the Westinghouse technology should be the one for the first nuclear power plant. So Westinghouse didn't win the tender because there had been no tender. Westinghouse had been courting their deal for pretty long, and the government agreed to it, and that is why they went to the European Commission to ask the permission, which they have reportedly received. There were some competitive talks, reportedly, with all the 3 suppliers, that's Westinghouse, EDF, and KHNP. And they were supposed to replace any formalized procedures which were ostensibly skipped.
Nuclear power is definitely the most expensive way of boiling water. In spite of this, several governments still intend to build nuclear power plants, with or without a tender, and have different weird financing mechanisms which are extremely dangerous for the state budget and in the end for electricity consumers and taxpayers. Mostly people don't know what was decided. But we can look at examples that are out there. For example, there are contracts for difference, which were done in the UK for Hinkley Point C reactor, but also now in the Czech Republic. There, the financing model for the first reactor bound the state to buy all the electricity produced in the planned nuclear power plant. So this means in 20 years, when the nuclear power plant might be completed, the state wanted to buy all the electricity generated there for 60 years with an option to extend this. The big danger lies, of course, in the fact that this is very expensive electricity, because this contract with the utility to build Dukovany 5 and 6 foresees also that there will be also not only all the costs which occur during construction, but also some profit. So it cannot be less than 100 euros per megawatt hour. But in 20 years' time, of course, there will be even more solar electricity and wind electricity, which at least half of the year have zero generating costs. And then the nuclear power plant will be absolutely not competitive. And what happens then is that the state will have to buy this electricity nonetheless and pay the company for this electricity, the agreed price. So this is a complete disaster for the state and the taxpayers, which was signed here. And this Czech contract should be seen as a warning sign for Slovenia, that they have to look carefully what kind of deal the state will be making with the utility and, for example, Westinghouse.